I've always had really messed up teeth growing up, like atrociously bad. Due to that and a few other things, I got my wisdom teeth out really late in life. Most people who undergo the process get them out sometime in high school or at the very latest early into their college years, but I was different. I didn't even sit down for a consultation until after graduating college. The process was incredibly painful and one of the most irritating things I've gone through in my entire life. I'm not going to bore you with all the details about my recovery, but there is something you need to know. For whatever reason, the pain I was experiencing was so bad that I couldn't sleep through the night without taking pain medication. I developed this system where I would wake myself up every 3 hours to take another pill, cycling between the 2 medications I'd been prescribed. It was awful, but it was the only thing I could do to prevent these massive toothaches that would quite literally have me in tears. It should go without saying that my sleep schedule was downright awful during that period. My body started getting used to 3-hour cycles of sleep, followed by periods of being awake, and it was difficult to return to normal even after my recovery was over. That was honestly the worst part, the sleep. It was not normal, I'm telling you. I didn't even feel human after a while. It was like I had become something else, constantly waking up and going back to sleep. I don't even want to think about it. One night, I'm pretty sure it was during the first week of recovery, I was up at like 4 a.m. to take my meds again. For whatever reason, I couldn't fall back asleep afterwards. I don't know if it was because of my condition or because the AC had stopped working, but it was really hot in my room, way hotter than usual. I remember tossing and turning for like 10 minutes before deciding I had to do something about the heat. The only thing I could think of was to open my bedroom window, which I did. That helped a little bit, but I still couldn't sleep. So there I was, lying there miserably in bed, praying with every fiber of my being that I just fall asleep. But of course, I didn't. At one point, I started picking up on this strange noise coming from outside my window. I never slept with my window open, so at first, I figured it was just some normal outside sound that I wasn't used to hearing. But the more I listened, the more I got the feeling that it wasn't a normal sound. It sounded almost like scratching, as if some kind of animal were dragging its claws on something. That's the best way I can describe it. At one point, the noise got louder, and I realized it sounded like it was coming from above me, from the roof. And then, a few seconds later, the noise started moving above me, gradually fading out of earshot. I was pretty positive at that point that it was some kind of critter messing around on the roof. My family lives in a woodsy area, so we've had our fair share of curious raccoons and pest infestations. I really wanted to just ignore it and go back to sleep, but I knew my dad would be livid if something burrowed into our attic again, so I had to do something. Plus, it wasn't like I was on the brink of falling asleep anyway. I was wide awake. So without much thought, I threw my covers off, jumped out of bed, and started making my way to the garage. From there, I grabbed one of my dad's heavy-duty flashlights and walked back through the house to the back door. My room sits on the first floor near the back of the house where the roof is the lowest, so I figured I'd check over there first. I made it to the spot outside my bedroom window and started sweeping the flashlight beam across the roof. I didn't see anything up there, so I sighed and figured the animal had crawled to a different part of the roof in the time it had taken me to get outside. I started walking around the house, trying my best to illuminate as much of the roof as possible. All I really needed to do was scare the animal away, which would be pretty easy if I could just find the damn thing. I was standing near the front of the house where the roof is nearly twice as high when I spotted something shift in the corner of my flashlight beam. With one quick flick of my wrist, I shot the flashlight toward the spot I had seen movement and nearly passed out. There, standing on the roof, was a person. Not an animal, not a pack of animals, but a fully grown human being. There was a naked human being standing on my roof, frozen in the beam of my flashlight. I screamed. I couldn't help it, and as soon as I did, the person on the roof started moving, almost like they were allergic to the light of my flashlight. I tried to trace their movements with the light, but they were absurdly fast. Until that moment, I didn't know it was possible to move so fast barefoot, let alone on the loose shingles of an uneven roof. They started making their way back to where my room was, and I sprinted around the house to intercept them. I don't even know what I was thinking. I should have just ran back inside, but there was some deep instinct in me that prevented me from backing off. I yelled for my dad as I ran, hoping he'd be able to get outside in time to help me ward off or restrain the psycho on our roof. I made it to the back of the house just in time to see the person preparing to jump off the roof. My first thought was that there was no way. There was absolutely no way a person could jump off that roof without suffering serious injuries, even from that lower point. Surely they'd have to find another way down. But without hesitation, the person jumped, slamming into the concrete with a deafening thump. The shock of what I was seeing had me frozen in place at that point. I couldn't even process what was going on because of how insane it was that someone had actually just jumped off our roof. I don't know how he didn't shatter every bone in his legs. My dazed shock only lasted a split second, but that was enough. The person immediately got up off the paver stones and charged toward me, tackling me to the ground. He started clawing at my eyes, almost like he was trying to rip my face off. I screamed and kicked, but I couldn't get him off me. He was grunting and spitting, and there was no logical explanation for how someone like that could be so strong. I started feeling blood pouring down my face, and in that moment, I thought I was going to die. But then, over the sound of my own screaming, I heard the back door burst open. Seconds later, my dad was pulling the person off of me, cursing and yelling like it was life or death. I got up off the ground just in time to see that psycho breaking free of my dad's grasp, completely covered in my blood. Instead of continuing to attack me or my dad, he ran to the edge of our yard, scaled our backyard fence, and disappeared into the darkness. My dad and I stood there in shock while the sounds of his footsteps crashing through the forest faded into the distance. I'll fast forward through the rest. I had to go to the hospital that night. My dad almost crashed just trying to get me there. I had lost a ton of blood, and the doctors had to give me all sorts of shots to prevent me from getting any infections or diseases that guy might have had. It was a nightmare. The one saving grace was that my mouth was basically untouched, so my teeth didn't need to be re-examined. The police were useless, not like they could have done much anyway. They said searching the woods would be unfeasible given how vast it was, and insisted that simple security cameras would have prevented the whole thing. My dad later discovered that the person on the roof had been trying to dig into our attic, just like an animal would. Ironically, it wasn't my dad or me who was the most affected. It was my mom. She cried about this incident so many times, and she was actually the one who went ahead and upped our home security. I still have no explanation for what happened that night. Who that guy was, where he had come from, and how he had even found our house are just a few of the 1,000 questions about that night that I fear will never be answered. My house is a very unique design. Well, I call it unique, but I bet a lot of people would call it weird instead. And actually, they have. The vast majority of friends I've hosted have all said so, even a handful of girls I've snuck in while my parents were away. As much as I'd love to make things easy for myself and just attach a bunch of photos of the house, I don't think my parents would appreciate that too much. So instead, I'll just tell you the important details. As it pertains to the story, there's really only one you need to know. You know how most houses have a porch or a walkway leading up to the front door, and there's usually some sort of covering above the door, maybe called a door canopy? Well, my house basically has a covered hallway that you have to walk through before entering the actual interior. Imagine your own front door, part of the house on either side, and then push the front door entrance back, into the house so to speak. It's essentially like walking in between two parts of the house without even being inside. This is all to say that my bedroom is on the first floor, right next to the external hallway that leads to the front door. If I stand up and look out the window next to my bed, I can actually see anyone standing at the front door, but they'd have their back to me. Hopefully that description makes sense. I developed a habit at a really young age of peeping out that window whenever a delivery person or guest would ring the doorbell. It was like having a little hidden camera that I could use to check who was there before stepping in full view of the door. What I'm about to tell you happened just a few months ago, at the very beginning of the summer. My parents were out of town for the week, so I decided to take advantage of the situation and let my girlfriend Anna sleep over for a few days. Normally, my strict and traditional parents would be very opposed to anything like that, but what they didn't know wouldn't hurt them. Plus, they'd met Anna a million times, so it wasn't like I was bringing an unwelcome stranger into our home. The first night was relatively uneventful, just a chill movie night with some snacks and a few glasses of wine. We went to sleep at a reasonable hour and went for a dip in the pool the following morning. I'm not really much of a party person, and neither is Anna, so we were more than happy to just spend some time together relaxing, playing games, and watching TV. The second night was when things went down. It was probably sometime around midnight. We were pillow talking in the dark, about to go to sleep, when I heard something from outside. It sounded like a screeching, or something being dragged. I shushed Anna and listened, trying to figure out what I was hearing. It sounded like it was coming from the driveway, which is off to the side of the house. That alarmed me, mostly because it meant the sound was coming from really close to the actual house. I listened a little while longer, and realized it was the sound of one of my dad's trash cans being moved around. He sometimes keeps them in front of the garage, and I was pretty positive I had seen a couple of them out there earlier that day. My first thought was that he hadn't fully emptied them and some animal was poking around looking for scraps or food or something. Still though, animal or not, hearing things moving around in your driveway is creepy, especially when you're the only one home and it's too dark to see anything. I told Anna to stay put, telling her that I was going to go shoo away the raccoon or other animal that was rummaging through the trash. Then, I calmly walked out of my room and over to the front door. I flicked on the switch for the exterior lights, but they didn't illuminate the driveway enough for me to see anything, just the front yard and the porch. So, reluctantly, I opened the door and walked outside, hoping my presence would be enough to scare off whatever was out there. I stood on the porch for a few seconds, waiting to hear scampering or see an animal run across the yard, but nothing happened. In fact, even the sound of the trash can had stopped. I figured there was a slim chance that whatever had been there had already run away, but concluded it was unlikely since I had been watching and listening the whole time. So, even more reluctantly, I clicked on my phone flashlight and started walking down the front steps toward the driveway. As I got closer, I realized that one of the trash cans had indeed been messed with. Two of them were sitting against the garage door, but one of them was completely overturned, with its contents scattered across the driveway. I groaned, knowing I was going to have to clean up the mess. I should mention that I didn't see anything out there, even after approaching, so I figured the animal had slunked away without me noticing. Just to be completely sure, I shined my flashlight all around the trash cans, but there was still nothing there. So that confirmed it. Without much more thought, I started picking stuff up from the driveway and throwing it back in the trash can. After I finished with that, I went back inside, opened the garage door, moved the trash cans inside, and locked it. I didn't want to run the risk of something returning later and waking me up. Then I went back to bed. Anna was still awake, but barely. I could tell she was about to fall asleep, so I gave her a gentle kiss on the forehead and tried to get comfortable on my side of the bed without disturbing her too much. I was in that in-between phase of consciousness and unconsciousness, where you're half dreaming but can pull yourself out of it if you concentrate, and that's when I heard something. This gentle tapping noise, like metal on glass. I was convinced it was part of the half-dream I was having, but something about it was just the slightest bit too unsettling. So instead of succumbing to exhaustion and drifting off into sleep, I opened my eyes and looked around the room. Sure enough, the tapping sound didn't stop. I froze. It hadn't been in my own head. It was coming from somewhere in the room. I didn't move a muscle. I just listened, trying to pinpoint exactly where it was emanating from, or even what it was. After a few seconds, I realized it wasn't coming from inside the room at all, even though it sounded so clear. That could only mean one thing, though. It was coming from just outside my window. I forced myself out of bed, stood up slowly, and peeked behind the curtain of my bedroom window. In the minimal light from outside, I could see the outline of a person standing at the front door, with their back to me. It was terrifying. I looked for a little while longer, and realized they were lightly tapping on the glass over and over and over again, as if expecting someone to answer the door. But that was insane. It was past midnight, and none of the house lights were on. I tried to make out more details about the person, but I couldn't see anything distinctive without more light. As I was standing there watching them, I noticed them start to turn around. Without thinking, I ducked under the light just in time, and I felt my heart start racing. I must have stayed crouched behind the window for a full minute, terrified that they had seen me. I didn't want to look again, but I had to. With a deep breath, I mustered up the courage to take another look out the window. Slowly, I stood back up, peeled the curtain back, and instantly regretted it. There, just 2 inches from the glass, was a face staring back at me. I yelled and recoiled from the window, yanking the curtain shut again. Even though we were only face to face for a split second, I was able to make out that it was a man with shriveled-looking skin, like someone whose face was melting away. As I fell back onto the bed, still yelling uncontrollably, Anna woke up. I screamed that there was someone outside, then made sure my bedroom door was locked before grabbing my phone and calling the police. The cops showed up a little over 10 minutes later. Anna and I stayed locked in my room the entire time. I really wanted to run to the front door to see where the creep had gone, but Anna was clutching onto my arm and wouldn't let me. When the police finally arrived, I let them inside and told them everything I had seen. They did a quick sweep of the house, and with my help, we confirmed that there was no sign of forced entry, and the entire house was locked up. That put me at ease, but it still didn't explain why that guy was creeping around my house and where he had gone. Eventually, after walking the perimeter with their flashlights and poking around the yard, they told us they didn't find anything unusual. One of them told me to call back should I see that guy again. Then they left. The rest of the week passed without incident. I ended up telling my parents, who, to my surprise, didn't seem overly concerned about it. We don't exactly live in a sketchy neighborhood, so I was surprised that they were being so nonchalant about the whole thing. To be fair though, their reaction made me feel like I was overreacting a little bit. I mean, what had really happened? Some homeless guy had crept around our house? The more I thought about it, the more I realized I was making a big deal out of nothing. But if that were the case, I probably wouldn't be writing this. The reason I'm writing this now is because for the past few nights, I've woken up randomly in the middle of the night to strange noises coming from outside my window. Not my trash cans moving around like what I had heard before, but different sounds. I told my dad about them, and he's actually planning on installing some security cameras around the perimeter of our house. But still, I can't help but feel like that guy showing up at my house wasn't a one-off thing. If anything else happens, I'll be sure to send a follow-up. What you're about to hear is an experience that nearly made me lose my mind. It's still something that I think about quite often, if I'm being honest, but I've been able to recover a bit in the months since it's happened. The whole story is pretty quick, so I'll get right into it. I'm a single guy in my mid-30s. I live alone with no pets in a small one-story house. The house is really modest. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a living room, kitchen, dining room, and a tiny garage. That's it. Life is fantastic. Because of my profession, I can work on my own time and don't have to answer to anyone, whether that be a girlfriend, a parent, or an employer. Freedom has always been an imperative part of my life, so I've done my best to maximize it wherever possible. I know a lot of people are different, and a lot of people might actually judge me for my quote, immature lifestyle, but everyone has different priorities and preferences, so as long as no one judges me, I won't judge them. The excess freedom is definitely tethered to its own set of drawbacks though. I've developed some bad habits that I'm sure some people would frown upon. One of them is my sleep schedule, which is god-awful. For some reason, I'm most productive at late hours of the night, so I often find myself staying up until dawn and sleeping into the afternoon. It's just how my body functions, and until I'm absolutely forced to, I don't see a reason to change anything. I was up really late one night. I'm talking past 3 a.m. late. I was sitting at my desk, getting some work done on my computer. I was in the zone, not even listening to music. Imagine yourself at peak hours. That's the kind of groove I was in. The room was dead silent, and I was alone with my thoughts, the sound of my keyboard, and my work. And then, bam, out of nowhere, the silence was interrupted by the sound of footsteps pounding down the hallway towards my bedroom, followed by 3 or 4 bangs on the bedroom door. Like deafening bangs, the type of bangs you'd expect the police trying to barge into a drug den would make. I shot up from my chair so fast I banged my knee on the desk and knocked my monitor over. I was just so shocked, it caught me completely off guard. Just imagine being in your own house at 3 a.m., alone, and complete silence just gets interrupted by banging on your door. It was, and still is, the most terrifying thing that has ever happened to me. Standing up was a pure reaction. I was completely frozen after that. I had my eyes fixated on the door, dreading the moment I knew was coming. The door bursting open and someone barging into my room. Me having to fight a complete stranger in pitch black darkness. But it never came. I didn't hear anything else, not even the sounds of footsteps retreating from the door. It was like I had imagined it, but I was 100% positive I hadn't. I don't know how long I stood there, but I physically could not force myself to move. It was like sleep paralysis, except I hadn't been dreaming. And then, finally, I heard the sounds of footsteps quickly walking back down the hall, so someone had been there. I don't know why, but hearing those footsteps again unlocked my brain. Without thinking, I grabbed an empty beer bottle off my desk, ran to the door, and started chasing after whoever had broken into my home. I didn't even try to be quiet. I screamed at the top of my lungs like a lunatic, hoping that would give me the extra adrenaline I needed. I ran through the entire house, screaming, but I never found anyone. My house isn't that big. There aren't many places someone could hide, but even after checking every room, there was no one there. All the doors and windows were locked too, which was even more confusing. My bout of confidence was completely drained after that, and I felt fear start flooding back in. I sprinted back to my room, locked the door, and called the police. In the time it took the police to arrive, I listened to my surroundings in complete silence, but never heard anything. When the police finally showed up, we searched the house together, but found nothing. One of the officers tried to convince me that whoever had been there had left, but I insisted that everything had been locked up. He told me I had probably overlooked something, and it took everything in me not to curse him out right there. I know for a fact that nothing had been unlocked, but but that didn't explain how that person had gotten into and out of my house. Unless I had imagined it, but I know I didn't. For the next week, I was a psychological mess. My brain refused to accept that I had imagined something so vivid, but I couldn't conceive of a possible way that that person had gotten into and out of my house. I'm much better now, but there was a time where I had trouble sleeping, eating, working, everything. Even now, the only explanation I can think of is that I somehow didn't notice an unlocked window or door in my house. Still though, why anyone would crash through my house just to run away is a complete mystery to me.
Hello listeners, this happened to me in November of 2021. I was living in upstate New York at the time and working night shifts at a warehouse. My shift ended at 11:30 p.m. Normally, the drive home took about 40 minutes, but that night there was a heavy snowstorm. The roads were covered in ice and visibility was terrible. I decided to take an old shortcut through the countryside. It was a road I had driven on many times before. Route 9. At least that's what I thought it was called. The road was almost completely empty. There were no street lights, no houses, no gas stations. Just dark trees on both sides. Snow continued falling against my windshield. I was driving slowly when I noticed something strange. My GPS suddenly stopped working. The screen went completely black. I tapped it several times. Nothing happened. Then my phone lost signal. I wasn't too worried. That area was known for having bad reception. So I continued driving. After about 10 minutes, I saw a sign. It was old and almost completely covered in snow. I slowed down and looked at it. The sign said, "Last stop, 2 miles." I thought it was strange. I had never seen a gas station or rest stop on that road before. But my fuel was getting low, so I decided to follow the sign. 2 miles later, I saw a small gas station. It looked like it had been abandoned for years. There were only 2 gas pumps. The building was small and dark, but one light was still on above the entrance. I pulled into the parking lot. The moment I turned off my engine, I noticed something. There were no tire tracks in the snow, not even mine. I looked behind my car. The snow was completely untouched. I thought maybe the snow was falling too quickly. I didn't think much of it. I went inside. A bell rang above the door. The store was warm. There were old shelves filled with snacks and drinks. Behind the counter stood an old man. He looked to be in his 70s. He was wearing a dark jacket. He looked at me. Then he said, "You are late." I didn't know what he meant. I smiled awkwardly. "Sorry?" The old man stared at me. Then he looked toward the window. It's almost midnight. I glanced at my phone. The screen was still showing no signal, but the time was 11:48 p.m. I asked him if he sold gas. He nodded. "Pump too." I walked outside. The gas pump looked extremely old. I inserted my card. Nothing happened. I tried again. Still nothing. Then the old man came outside. He stood behind me. Cash only. I checked my wallet. I had about $40. I gave him the money. He took it without saying anything. Then he pointed toward the pump. "Fill it." I started pumping gas. While I waited, I noticed something strange. The gas station sign above the building said, "Last stop, East 1956. I looked at the old man. "How long have you been working here?" He didn't answer. Instead, he asked, "Where are you going?" I told him the name of my town. The old man looked at me. For a few seconds, he said nothing. Then he asked, "Do you know the way back?" I laughed. "Yeah, I just came back from there." The old man shook his head. No, you didn't. I stopped pumping. What? He looked toward the dark road. You came from the other side. I didn't understand. I looked at my car, then I looked back at him. Is there another road? The old man didn't answer. Instead, he walked back inside. I finished filling the tank. Then I went inside to get change. The old man was standing behind the counter. I handed him a $40 bill. He gave me nothing. I reminded him that I had paid for gas. He said, "You already paid." I pointed toward the pump. "I gave you $40." He looked at me. Then he said, "Not for the gas." I felt uncomfortable. I asked him what he meant. He simply turned around and walked toward the back of the store. I stood there for a few seconds. Then I decided to leave. As I reached the door, the old man spoke. "Don't stop again." I turned around. He was still facing away from me. "Why?" He didn't answer. I walked outside. My car was exactly where I had left it. But something had changed. The snow had stopped. The sky was completely clear. I checked my phone. It was 12:03 a.m. Only 15 minutes had passed, but the snowstorm was gone. I got into my car and started driving. The road looked different. The trees seemed taller. The road was narrower, and there were no signs. I drove for about 10 minutes. Then I saw a woman standing beside the car. She was wearing a long white coat. I immediately slowed down. She was standing in the middle of nowhere. No houses, no cars, no streetlights, just the woman. I considered stopping. Then I remembered the old man's warning, "Don't stop again." So I kept driving. As I passed her, I looked in the rearview mirror. She was gone. I slammed on the brakes. My heart started racing. I looked behind me. There was no one on the road. I thought maybe I had imagined her. Then my passenger side window was tapped. I froze. Tap, tap, tap. I slowly turned my head. The woman was standing beside my car. Her face was inches from the window. I couldn't see her clearly because of the darkness, but I could see her eyes. She was staring directly at me. I didn't move. She lifted one hand. Then she pointed toward the back seat. I looked behind me. There was nothing there. When I looked back at the window, she was gone. I started the car and drove as soon as I could. A few minutes later, I saw a sign, "Welcome to Millbrook." I recognized the name. Millbrook was a town near where I lived. I thought I was finally close to home. But then I noticed the date on the sign. Millbrook, founded 1892. I continued driving. Soon I saw houses, but they looked old, very old. Most of them had no lights on. Some had broken windows. I passed a small church. There was a sign outside. I slowed down. The sign said, "Service tonight, 12:30 a.m." I checked the time, 12:27 a.m. I drove past the church. Then I heard something, a sound coming from the back seat. Someone was breathing. I immediately looked in the rearview mirror. The back seat was empty, but I could hear breathing, slow, deep, right behind me. I pulled over. The breathing stopped. I waited. Nothing. I looked into the back seat. There was no one there. Then my car radio turned on by itself. Static filled the car. I tried turning it off. The button didn't work. Then a voice came through the static, a man's voice, very faint. "Don't go home." I froze. The voice continued, "Don't go home." I turned off the radio. This time it worked. I started driving again. A few minutes later, I saw my town. I recognized the road. I recognized the buildings. I even recognized the gas station near my apartment. I felt relieved. I pulled into the parking lot. The gas station was open. I went inside. A young man was standing behind the counter. I asked him what time it was. He looked at me strangely. "Almost 1 a.m." I checked my phone. 12:58 a.m. I asked him if Route 9 was open. He stared at me. Route 9? Yeah. He shook his head. There hasn't been a Route 9 here for years. I laughed nervously. What do you mean? He pointed toward the window. The old road was removed in the 70s. I stared at him. I told him about the gas station, the old man, the woman, the town. He didn't say anything. Then he asked me, what gas station? I described it. The old pumps, the small building, the sign. The young man slowly shook his head. Then he said something that I will never forget. There was a gas station on the old road. I asked him when. He said until 1968. I felt my stomach drop. I asked him what happened in 1968. He told me that the gas station had burned down. The owner and several customers died. I asked him how many people. He said 5. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I searched online. I found an old newspaper article. The headline said 5 dead in Millbrook gas fire. 5 dead in Millbrook gas station fire. The date was November 18, 1968, exactly 53 years before the night I had driven there. I kept reading. The article said the gas station had been located on an old road that no longer existed. The article said the gas station had been located on an old road that no longer existed. The owner was an elderly man. There were 4 customers inside the building when the fire started. None of them survived. I looked at the photographs. There was a picture of the old gas station. I immediately recognized it. The same building, the same sign, the same 2 gas pumps. Then I noticed something else. The owner in the photograph was the same old man I had spoken to. The exact same face, the same jacket, the same expression. I stopped breathing. I zoomed in on the newspaper photograph. The article said the man had died at the age of 20. A few months later, I moved to another state. I tried to forget everything. For a while, I succeeded. Until last winter, I was driving home late at night. It was snowing. The road was almost empty. Then I saw a sign. It was covered in snow. I slowed down. I already knew what it said. Last stop 2 miles. I immediately turned around and drove in the opposite direction. For nearly an hour, I didn't stop. I didn't look back, but then my phone rang. The number was unknown. I answered without thinking. There was silence. Then I heard a man's voice. The same voice from the gas station. You're late. I hung up. The phone rang again. I turned it off. Then I heard something from the back seat. 3 slow knocks. I looked in the rearview mirror. The back seat was empty. Then I heard a whisper. Don't stop again. I never found out what happened to the other 4 people who died in that gas station fire. But sometimes I wonder if the woman I saw on the road was one of them. Sometimes I wonder if the voice on the radio was another. And sometimes, when I am driving alone at night, I see a small light in the distance. A gas station, 2 old pumps, and an elderly man standing outside waiting. Whenever I see it, I keep driving because I know what happens if I stop. And I know what the old man meant when he said, you already paid. I just don't know what I paid for.
In the summer of 2017, just outside Los Baños, California, 18-year-old Obdulia Sanchez was behind the wheel of a Buick which she had no business driving. She was intoxicated. She was speeding. And, while balancing a phone in her hand, she was live streaming. Sitting in the back of the vehicle were Obdulia's 14-year-old sister, Jacqueline, and Jacqueline's girlfriend, Manuela. The trio were heading from Fresno to Stockton. As the car sped along the road, Obdulia stared into the camera, laughing, singing, shouting, taking her hands off of the wheel. And predictably, while chatting with her audience, she lost control of the vehicle. The car veered off Henry Miller Road, smashed through a barbed wire fence, and rolled violently at least 2 times. As Obdulia came to her senses in the wreckage, she realized neither Jacqueline nor Manuela were still in the back. Both passengers had been ejected through the rear window of the vehicle as it flipped, and they hadn't been wearing their seatbelts. But what made this case explode across the internet wasn't just the crash, it was what came after, because the live stream didn't stop.
Hey, everybody, if I go to jail for life, you already know why. My sister is f***ing dying. This is the last thing I wanted to happen, okay? Alright? I don't care though, I'ma hold it down. I love you, rest in peace, sweetie. If you don't survive, baby, I'm so sorry.
In the immediate aftermath, Obdulia continued filming. She approached her sister, Jacqueline, who was laying motionless on the ground with a cracked skull and exposed brain, and pointed the camera of her phone right into her face as she lay dying for all of her viewers to see, going so far as to show her gaping wound in close-up detail. At last, she called for help, but didn't give the operator clear directions to their location.
Hello? You have an emergency? Hello? Can you come pick up my sister? Dead. Wake the up! Wake up! Okay, listen to me. I need to know what you see around you so that way I can send someone out to help you. So with your... Alright, go ahead. What do you see? Hello? Ma'am, did you just call 911 about an accident? Where? What do you mean where? Where are you? I don't care where I'm at. Well, then how do you expect me to find you? I don't. No, you're the government. You should know how to find me.
Thankfully, witnesses near the scene also called for assistance and were able to direct first responders to the crash site. By the time the police and paramedics arrived, Jacqueline was already dead. Manuela was taken to the hospital with severe leg injuries. Officers immediately handcuffed Obdulia, who was behaving extremely erratically, swearing and shoving, asking why the responders took so long to arrive, describing her sister as an effing toe tag, and announcing, "My parents are gonna kill me." She aggressively refused to take a breathalyzer test, spat at responders, and kicked an EMT in the face. Ultimately, she had to be restrained. She was charged with gross vehicular manslaughter while intoxicated, as well as child endangerment. Though only a handful of people were watching the situation unfold live on Instagram, millions witnessed the moment secondhand, and the livestream would be used as evidence in Obdulia's trial. She justified her actions by stating, "I knew I had more than 5,000 followers. Live-streaming Jacqueline's body was the only way my sister would get a decent burial. I would never expose my sister like that. I anticipated the public donating money because my family isn't rich." Prosecutors argued that Obdulia's actions didn't stem from generosity though, but rather from main character syndrome, and a warped sense that views were worth more than her own sister's life. Indeed, in an earlier livestream filmed shortly before the crash, while both sisters were en route to Fresno to pick up Manuela, Jacqueline could be heard telling Obdulia, Ultimately, Obdulia pleaded no contest to the charges. She was sentenced to 6 years in prison, but was released on parole after serving just 26 months. To many, the young woman wasn't just a reckless driver who clearly showed little remorse. She was the embodiment of social media addiction, a person who saw everything, even her own sister's last breaths, as content. In later interviews, Obdulia herself even described live streaming as a reflex. It seems that in that terrible moment, her sisterly instincts were overpowered by a new prime directive: to farm engagement. Obdulia's uncle, Jose, was heartbroken when he heard about the incident, but he wasn't surprised. As he would later say in an interview, "Obdulia did a lot of bad things. Too bad. I can't even talk about it. I told my brother when she was around 12 that Obdulia was heading down a dangerous path and that they needed to do something. She's dead to me now. If she dies tomorrow, I don't care. She's a very bad person." Less than a month after her early release, Obdulia was again behind bars after leading police on a high-speed chase that resulted in yet another crash. While searching that vehicle, officers found a loaded gun. What Obdulia planned to do with it remains unclear. Whatever the case, by 2022, she was a free woman yet again, and made her return to social media. Either due to a lack of remorse, a lack of self-awareness, or a combination of both, she posted content of herself drinking in vehicles, showing her dream cars, and joking about her dark side. During several live streams, she reportedly made light of her sister's death. She also left posts challenging those who ran mouth about her DUI to drop a pin. It's clear that Obdulia didn't have any fears about confrontation, but unfortunately for her, it seems it wasn't long before she antagonized the wrong person. In December 2025, Obdulia Sanchez was killed in a drive-by shooting in Stockton. She was found with gunshot wounds on a residential street. Another person was also injured in the incident, but authorities have yet to release details about a suspect, a motive, or whether the incident had any connection with her past run-ins with the law. Some people online called her death karma. Others expressed condolences to her parents, who had now lost 2 of their daughters. But this was one case where nobody was quoted as saying the victim was a wall-like person with no enemies to speak of. Someone fragile, and would like to think if they were ever in need of help, that strangers would treat them with the same humanity, dignity, and care that we would. But sometimes, people can be dangerously disappointing. Fermin Delgado Pinto was born in Peru in March of 1933, and spent most of his life working the land. Those who knew him described him the same way: a gentle, friendly, devoted family man. Fermin loved fishing by the coast, but long walks were his favourite pastime. He'd spend hours rambling all over the place, and no matter how far he ventured, he never had any trouble finding his way home. By 2011, Fermin's daughters and granddaughters had settled in Chile, and he decided to follow, moving into their home in Peñalolén. By then in his late 70s, he still insisted on living an independent life. He was getting on a bit, yes, but he was still healthy. He took no medications, showed no signs of dementia, had no cognitive impairments. He was sharp, lucid, self-sufficient, and he would remain that way, right up until the day of the incident. In March 2018, one of Fermin's daughters, Lily, celebrated her 25th wedding anniversary. As a surprise present, her husband had secretly organized a trip back to Lima to visit family members. Fermin found out about the trip and insisted on coming along. He wanted to see his relatives back in Peru again. Who knows, he thought, it might be his last opportunity. Of course, Lily's own flights were already booked by the time he found out, so Fermin had to purchase his tickets separately at the last moment. He was able to book a seat on the same plane as his daughter for the outbound flight to Lima, but worryingly, would have to catch a different plane on the way back. Fermin may have been capable for a now 85-year-old, but he was still that, an old man. Lily knew that solo travel could be stressful at the best of times, and she was concerned about her father's ability to navigate the airport alone and deal with all of the rigmarole that comes with international travel. But LATAM, the airline that would be flying him home, assured her that Fermin would be assisted the entire way. He'd be helped off the plane after landing, placed in a wheelchair, guided through customs, to the baggage claim, and out to meet his family, who'd be waiting for him on the other side, all at no extra cost. And so, feeling reassured, Lily helped Fermin book his return flight to Chile. Fermin and Lily made it safely to Lima, and celebrated her wedding anniversary with their Peru-based family members as planned. After that, they enjoyed a 2-week holiday. Then, on April 2nd, they returned to the airport, ready to catch their flight home. Fermin's flight was scheduled to leave 2 hours before Lily's, so he'd be stepping through the departure gates first. Lily knew that her father would be getting all the assistance he needed from the airline, but just to be safe, she also made sure that he was wearing a credentials sheet with his name, address, and her phone number on it. And with that attached to his person, Fermin hugged his daughter one last time and stepped through the departure gates. Back at Arturo Merino Benitez International Airport in Chile, several of Fermin's other family members were waiting at arrival gate 4, ready to greet him and help him back home. His plane was scheduled to land at around 5:30 p.m, but an hour passed, and the old man still hadn't appeared. Fermin didn't own a mobile phone, and so, at first, his family assumed that he was simply delayed. And so they waited, and waited. After a while, their impatience turned to confusion, which then turned to panic. His family approached airport staff, who were less than helpful. They wouldn't confirm whether Furman's flight had actually landed, wouldn't allow them into the baggage claim area to look for him, wouldn't entertain the possibility of making an announcement, and repeatedly told the family members to wait patiently. Unsure of what else to do, they contacted Lily, who was still in Peru, waiting to board her own flight. She confirmed that Furman had caught the plane home, that it had left on time, and that he should be there. She spent the next 4 hours in the air, not knowing whether her father was lost, injured, or worse. By the time she landed in Chile, nothing had changed. Furman was still missing, and airport staff remained just as obstructive. Desperate, the family began their own search, splitting up across public areas of the terminal. One relative waited near the taxi pickup zone for so long that airport staff forcibly removed her for loitering. Eventually, the family began asking random people whether they were on Furman's flight. That's when they found a distressed old woman sitting alone in a wheelchair. She told them that she had been traveling alone from Colombia, that she too had been promised assistance, but that she had been abandoned for hours by staff members. A security guard eventually told her, bluntly, that no one was coming to help her. "Ma'am," he reportedly said, "stand up and leave, because they're gonna leave you sitting here for hours. They usually do this. They leave people here and never come back." The implication was chilling. Had Furman also been left to fend for himself? After being repeatedly pressed for details, airport staff finally admitted the truth. Furman's flight had landed on time. They told a story about how there had been some issue with his baggage, how he had grown impatient, stood up from his wheelchair, and walked away of his own accord. It's unclear whether that was true or not, as the employee assisting Furman has never been identified. However, CCTV footage, which was later obtained, showed Furman wandering through the terminal alone without his luggage, pausing, turning around, scanning faces. At one point, he walked towards the taxi rank outside. There, an official driver offered him a lift, but Furman politely turned him down. Minutes later, he could be seen approaching a man in a neon jacket, likely an airport or transit worker, who pointed him in a direction. Furman walked off the way he pointed. That employee has never come forward or been identified, so we don't know what Furman asked or where he was trying to go. Cameras then captured him lining up at a bus stop. After waiting for a while, he stepped out of the line and continued walking. The direction he walked led to Route 68, a major highway connecting Santiago to Valparaiso. After seeing that footage, Furman's family filed a missing persons report, one which wasn't validated by the authorities for 5 long days. During that time, Furman's family searched for him alone. They printed flyers, knocked on doors, searched the area around the airport, checked hospitals, checked morgues, but no sign of their loved one turned up. The police showed little urgency and told Furman's family to return only if they had proof that he was in danger. LATAM Airlines denied responsibility. The airport denied responsibility. Each claimed that their duties ended once Furman walked off. As for his family, they refused to accept that a person could so casually disappear off the face of the earth like that. Had he fallen down a manhole? Wandered into the mountains? Been picked up by a driver with evil intentions? All the worst possibilities swirled in their minds. In the days that followed, sightings of Furman were reported near metro stations, construction sites, and along Route 68. A security guard recalled an elderly man matching his description, saying that he was heading to Mapocho. Following that vague lead, his family expanded their search, and, in doing so, discovered multiple other confused elderly people living rough on the streets. Unbelievably, many of them had simply been abandoned in the middle of nowhere by illegal taxi drivers. They had been picked up at the airport, and when it became clear they didn't have enough money to cover their fare, were dumped on the side of the road. Unfortunately, such cases are far from unheard of. An elderly person gets left to fend for themselves, and, unable to get home or contact loved ones, winds up living homeless. or worse, is intercepted by a criminal gang and forced to beg to line their pockets. Furman's family now strongly believe that the same fate befell him, that he was picked up by a dodgy taxi and was abandoned somewhere far from home, far from civilization, and that nobody helped him. He had only 9,000 pesos in his pocket at the time of his vanishing, around $15 US at the time, far from enough to cover his fare home. Terribly, Furman was never seen or heard from again. Whether he became another disoriented homeless person or perished somewhere remote, his fate was entirely preventable had just one person done their job correctly. No staff members were ever charged with negligence in relation to Furman's disappearance. Some probably never gave him a second thought from that day on. And if this case teaches us anything, it's that sometimes it's not people's malice we should be fearful of. It's their indifference. Furman's family continue to cling on to the hope that he's still out there somewhere, a prospect that feels more remote with each passing day. If you live in Santiago or nearby, please keep an eye out for this man. I'd like to end this segment by shouting out Yulai Saib. She covered this case while in contact with Fermin's family, and her coverage was a really helpful source of information. Spanish speakers, go check her channel out. Also, a shout out to Moondog151 over on Reddit, whose English language write-up of this otherwise region-locked case inspired me to look into the mystery in the first place. 1990 was a conventional one in Florida's unconventional Aero Club, an exclusive neighborhood built around a private airstrip where residents could taxi their personal aircraft straight into hangars attached to their backyards. Some residents were preparing to jet off for their long weekend, but inside one house, 40-year-old Marlene Warren was taking things slower and instead enjoying a long breakfast. Her husband Michael was out of town, but her 21-year-old son Joseph was there to keep her company, as were a few of his friends. Joe had recently broken his leg, and they'd all stopped by to help lift his spirits. The group sat around the kitchen table, chatting over coffee and eggs, when, at 10:51 AM, the doorbell unexpectedly rang. Marlene walked to the front door, expecting to greet a delivery driver or a neighbor. When she opened it, however, she was met by something unusual. Standing on her doorstep was a clown. Aside from their practical black shoes, the figure was fully costumed. They wore bright makeup, a red nose, an orange, afro-like wig, a ridiculous multicolored costume, and bright white gloves. In one hand, the clown carried a basket of red and white carnations. In the other, 2 balloons. One of them decorated with a scene from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and the other printed with a simple message: "You're the greatest." The clown handed the balloons to Marlene. And for a moment, it must have seemed whimsical. Perhaps someone had sent her son a clownogram to lift his spirits. Marlene reportedly smiled. "How pretty," she said. Those were the last words to leave her lips. In that moment, the clown produced a gun, raised it, and shot Marlene in the mouth at point-blank range. The clown then turned and walked calmly to a white Chrysler LeBaron convertible parked just outside the house. Joe, who had witnessed the incident unfold from a window in the living room, rushed to his mother's side. Neither he nor any of his 3 friends managed to catch the killer's license plate. Joe tried to pursue the vehicle, but couldn't catch up in time. Marlene was rushed to hospital, but her injuries were catastrophic. 2 days later, life support was withdrawn. Her son Joseph sat by her bed, begging her to stay with him, promising her that justice would come. And then she quietly slipped away. In an effort to help find her killer, Joseph gave a description of the clown to the police, but since the whole incident unfolded within less than a minute, he could only give vague details. They stood around 6'1", maybe a bit more, maybe a bit less. They walked with the bravado of a man, but had the slender figure of a woman, so he couldn't even be sure about their sex. But Joe told investigators there was one thing that was burned into his mind. Before getting into their vehicle and driving away, the clown briefly turned and stared at him. And behind all of the props and makeup were a pair of dark brown, soulless eyes. That was the one thing he was certain of. The white LeBaron was later found abandoned roughly 8 miles from the Warren home in a Winn-Dixie parking lot. The cops traced it back to a car rental company called Payless, who had reported it stolen shortly before Marlene's murder. And so, detectives examined the inside of the vehicle. On the driver's headrest, they recovered orange synthetic fibers consistent with a clown wig, along with strands of dark brown hair. They later traced the balloons and flowers to a local supermarket, and employees remembered who had bought them. A woman with chocolate-coloured hair and brown eyes who had paid in cash. A nearby costume shop also reported that a woman with dark brown hair and dark eyes had purchased a clown outfit just days earlier. As the physical evidence mounted, detectives turned their attention inward, towards Marlene's husband and Joe's stepdad, Michael Warren. Michael ran a used car and rental business called a Bargain Auto Rentals, but much of the couple's property, valued in excess of $1 million, was actually held in Marlene's name. If she were to die first, he would inherit everything. Michael certainly had plenty of motivation to kill his wife, that's for sure, and their relationship must have been fraught, as Marlene herself had confided in her children. If anything happens to me, Mike did it. Joe believed that Michael wasn't capable of violence, to which Marlene replied, "Don't put it past him." Well, the police certainly weren't putting it past him. A con man at heart, Michael regularly took out ads in local papers, with his company name in quotations at the top, and Pay Less in big bold letters beneath it. As a result, Payless customers regularly assumed that the two businesses were one and the same, and would end up returning their rental cars to Michael, who would then keep them and rent or sell them. Seeing how the killer clown had driven a stolen Payless vehicle, it stood to reason that Mr. Warren was involved. Thing is, Michael had an alibi. At the time of the shooting, he was traveling toward Miami with friends who could all vouch for him. Though he would later be convicted of racketeering, grand theft, and odometer tampering connected to his business dealings, the authorities couldn't place him at the scene of the crime that morning. But not being there doesn't mean he wasn't involved. Just a year before the incident, he had asked a lawyer, quote, if a husband were to kill his wife, what would happen to her estate? Assuming it to be nothing more than a hypothetical question, the lawyer replied, if he's convicted of murdering his wife, he wouldn't inherit, but if he were convicted of a lower charge, he would. Not only that, but if he had a friend to it, and they couldn't tie him as an accessory, he'd get away scot-free. And so, attention shifted to someone else, one of Michael Warren's employees, a then 27-year-old woman named Sheila Keene. She was described as a bubbly and gutsy woman who had been repossessing cars for his business for the past 5 months or so. She was fairly tall, slender and pleasant looking, but her most defining features were undeniably her dark brown eyes. Sheila didn't have any personal connection to Marlene. There's no indication that they had met or even spoken. But unbeknownst to Marlene, the two of them were actually embroiled in a romantic rivalry. According to reports, Michael and Sheila were seeing each other behind Marlene's back. When questioned by investigators following the murder, Sheila denied the affair, but 2 of her neighbors said that they saw her and Michael together so frequently that they assumed the two were married. Despite playing dumb, in 2002, 12 years after Marlene's death, Sheila did tie the knot with Michael and became Mrs. Keene Warren. Whether she was involved or not, many found it suspicious that Michael married the prime suspect in his first wife's murder. After the wedding, Sheila underwent something of a metamorphosis. She dyed her hair blonde and began introducing herself as Debbie, as if she were trying to adopt a new identity. She and Michael opened a burger restaurant called the Purple Cow, where employees described Mrs. Keene Warren as an aggressive and mean boss. They had all heard the rumors, of course, that she had killed her husband's former wife, but all of them thought it was nothing more than a weird joke. A joke which Sheila, or Debbie as they knew her, played into. She enjoyed it so much, in fact, that one Halloween, she turned up to work dressed as a clown, shown here in this photo. Her employees noted it was one of the few times they had seen her genuinely smile. But could the new Mrs. Keene Warren have wanted to marry Marlene's husband so much that she would kill for the privilege, even if that meant killing an otherwise innocent stranger? if the clown shoe fits. Fibers consistent with those found in the getaway car were later recovered in Sheila's home. Hair samples recovered from that vehicle were also microscopically consistent with hers. But though police were certain that they had found the gunwoman, in the early 1990s, their case against Sheila rested largely on circumstantial evidence. Unfortunately, DNA technology was nowhere near as advanced as it is today. That, paired with other difficulties, such as Sheila not being 6'1" as Joe had described, and the clown outfit never being recovered, meant that the case stalled. For years, the story of a clown gunning down a woman on her porch spread. Then, before the internet took off, many assumed it to be nothing more than an urban legend, one which played on people's coulrophobia. But in reality, it was one of Florida's most unsettling unsolved crimes, and every day that passed without any new developments was a day that Marlene's son, Joe, suffered. He began drinking and using substances to cope with his grief. Thankfully, Joe would eventually face down his demons and clean himself up, and, decades after the loss of his mother, was offered a glimmer of hope that the killer clown would be unmasked. In 2014, the Palm Beach County Cold Case Unit reopened the investigation into Marlene's slaying. Advances in forensic science allowed evidence once considered inconclusive to be re-examined. In time, they were able to prove that the hairs found in the abandoned LeBaron did in fact belong to Sheila Keene Warren. 3 years later, in September 2017, Sheila was arrested in Virginia and extradited to Florida, where she was charged with first-degree murder. In April 2023, she pleaded guilty to second-degree murder as part of a plea agreement after prosecutors withdrew the pursuit of the death penalty. She was sentenced to 12 years in prison. However, in November 2024, she walked free after serving just 18 months, having received credit for time spent in custody and for good behavior. Why Sheila Keene Warren decided to disguise herself as Bozo that fateful morning has never been answered, but it may have had something to do with Marlene's open fascination with circus clowns. Growing up, Marlene had painted numerous clown portraits. As an adult, she decorated her home with clown figures and statuettes. She was seemingly obsessed with them, symbolically and aesthetically. With that in mind, Sheila may have chosen her costume as a way to disarm Marlene, to bring down her guard. Or, more maliciously, it may have just been her way of humiliating her. A way for her to punish her love rival, ensuring that she was killed by something that brought her joy. As for Michael Warren, he was never charged in connection with his ex-wife's murder, as it was never proved conclusively that he and Sheila planned it together. But one has to wonder how Sheila knew about Marlene's love of clowns. Given that she and Marlene had apparently never met, someone must have given her the idea. Despite Marlene's killer being formally identified, to me, this case still feels far from resolved. "17-year-old Sharon Faye Smith was driving home from a pool party in Lexington County, South Carolina. The soon-to-be graduate was known to friends and family simply as Shari. According to them, she was quiet, thoughtful and dependable, the kind of teenager who followed routines and rarely drew attention to herself. When she pulled into the long driveway of her family's home on Lake Murray Boulevard at 3:38 p.m., nothing seemed out of place. Her father, Bob, looked out of the window and saw Sharon parked up beside the mailbox at the end of the drive. Turning away, he expected her to walk through the door any second. A few minutes passed, and confused as to why Sharon hadn't come inside, Bob walked out to the driveway. And though his daughter's car was still there, with its driver's side door open and its engine running, Sharon herself was nowhere to be seen. Letters were scattered around the ground surrounding the mailbox. Still inside the car were all of Sharon's personal belongings, including her diabetes medicine, which she needed to take throughout the day. She would never willingly walk off without that medication. With no sign of their daughter anywhere, and no way to contact her, Bob and his wife Hilda contacted the police and reported Shari missing. 2 days later, the phone rang. The male voice on the other end of the line was calm, measured, but clearly distorted. Calling from a payphone, the figure told Sherry's family that the teenager had been kidnapped, but that she was still alive and watching TV. He also told them to expect a letter in the mail. And then he hung up. That letter, which was intercepted early by the Lexington County Sheriff's Department, didn't contain any ransom demands or any taunting message from Sharon's captor. It hadn't even been written by him at all. It had been written by Sharon herself, and chillingly, it was titled Last Will and Testament. The letter was examined by professionals, who confirmed that it had been written in Sharon's handwriting. Her captor, now presumed killer, had forced her to write it, but the words were from the heart, and clearly Sharon's own. It contained expressions of love, final wishes, and a request for a closed casket funeral.
Do you believe me now? Well, I'm not really sure I believe you because I haven't had any word from Sherry. And I need to know that Sherry is well. You'll know in 2 or 3 days. Why 2 or 3 days? Call the search off.
Over the next several days, the calls continued. Sometimes the man would talk for only a few moments, and sometimes for longer. He usually spoke in the present tense, hinting that Sherry may still be alive. During one of those phone calls, the man read from Sharon's will. In another, he worryingly stated that Sharon was part of him.
3:10 a.m. Saturday, the 1st of June. She had wrote what you received. 4:58 a.m. Saturday, the 1st of June.
Okay, Saturday, the 1st of June, 4:58 a.m.
Became one soul.
Became one soul.
What does that mean? No questions now, please. Till sure met. Search no more. Blessings are near.
Do not kill my daughter, please. I mean,
We
please.
love and miss y'all. Get good rest tonight. Goodbye.
Wait a minute. He's gone, Mom.
Whoever the sicko was, he clearly took pleasure in tormenting his victim's family and feeding off their anguish, while also pretending, or perhaps genuinely believing, that he had godlike powers. And then, 6 days after taking Sharon, once he'd had his fun, he called yet again and gave some very specific directions.
Hello?
Listen carefully. Take Highway 378 west to traffic circle. Take Prosperity exit. Go 1.5 miles. Turn right at sign. Moose Lodge number 103. Go 1/4 mile. Turn left at white frame building. Go to backyard. 6 feet beyond. We're waiting. God chose us.
Those directions led to Sharon Smith's lifeless body, dumped in a wooded area near Saluda County. Her life had been ended approximately 12 hours after she had been taken. An exact COD couldn't be determined. Knowing how badly her killer craved attention, investigators made a tactical decision. They staged a public memorial for Sherry, where mourners could leave gifts like flowers, letters, and stuffed toys, hoping that the killer wouldn't be able to resist claiming a memento after all of the other guests had departed. But frustratingly, he didn't take the bait. Even after the service, he denied Sharon's family the ability to grieve in peace. For weeks after her death, the man who killed her tormented them over the phone. He targeted her sister, Dawn in particular, relaying details about how Sherry had died. He explained how he had let her choose her own manner of demise, how she had chosen suffocation, how he had wrapped duct tape all the way around her head so she couldn't breathe. He also began hinting that Dawn would be his next victim. His calls were relentless, bordering on obsessive. Given the physical similarities between the two sisters, many believed that the killer actually mistook Sherry for Dawn, that she had been the intended target all along. Unflustered, Dawn would always accept the killer's calls and keep him on the line, hoping that he'd slip up and reveal something that would shed light on his identity. And slip up he did. Not only did he stop disguising his voice, but during one particularly significant call, he broached the subject of Deborah May Helmick.
Have you heard about Deborah May Hamrick, the 10-year-old? A-T-L-M-I-C-K?
Richland County?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Okay, listen carefully. Go 1 north,
On June 14th, 1985, just 2 weeks after Sharon went missing, 9-year-old Deborah was kidnapped in nearby Richmond County while playing outside. A man in a silver car accelerated towards her, forced her inside his vehicle, and sped away with her in a matter of seconds, all while a desperate neighbor tried to stop him from getting away. 8 days after she was taken, the mystery caller contacted the Smith family again and told them where to find the child's body, confirming that the same man was responsible for both slayings. But though he undeniably made slip-ups while chatting with Dawn and the rest of the Smith family, what finally broke this case was a simple piece of paper, one we've already covered: Sharon's last will and testament. A forensic examiner was brought in to analyze the document. Using an electrostatic detection device, a tool designed to reveal impressions left behind when writing atop other sheets, they began scanning the surface of the paper and pressed faintly into the sheet were names and phone numbers, as if someone had written a list of contacts using the same pad of paper. One number in particular stood out. It was almost complete, missing just a single digit. Detectives worked through all of the possible variations one by one, until finally, someone answered. On the line was a young man. When asked whether he had any connection to South Carolina, he gave them the names of Ellis and Sharon Shepard, a couple who just so happened to live 15 miles from the Smith family home. When questioned, the Shepards explained that they'd been away on holiday at the time of Sherry's disappearance, but when detectives played them the undistorted voice from the phone calls, their reaction was immediate. Both identified the voice as belonging to the man who had been house-sitting for them while they were away: Larry Gene Bell, a 35-year-old local man with a history of offences, including indecent exposure and harassment. According to the Shepards, when they returned from their holiday, Bell seemed unusually agitated, fixated on Sherry's disappearance, and eager to talk about little else. Ellis Shepard also confirmed that the list of phone numbers uncovered by forensic examiners had been left for Bell in case of emergencies. With that, everything shifted. Phone records confirmed that several of the calls made to the Smith family after Sherry's disappearance had originated from the Shepards' home. Inside the residence, police recovered several items of concern, including strands of blonde hair. Investigators began to piece together a disturbing possibility: that Bell had used the Shepards' home as a torture ground, a place he believed would never be examined. On June 27, 1985, 28 days after Sherry Smith vanished from her driveway, Larry Gene Bell was arrested. His trial began in February 1986. Throughout, Bell shouted bizarre statements, made cryptic remarks, and appeared determined to convince the jury that he was unhinged. But the act failed. After less than an hour of deliberation, the jury found him guilty of the kidnapping and first-degree murder of Sharon Smith. A year later, he was convicted yet again, this time for the slaying of Deborah May Helmick. On October 4th, 1996, after 10 years on death row, Larry Bell was sent to the electric chair. He offered no final words. In February 2025, Bell was formally identified as the killer of a 26-year-old woman named Sandy Elaine Cornett, who vanished in 1984. He also remains the prime suspect in the disappearance of at least one other woman, Denise Newsom Porch. Neither of their bodies have ever been found. Hi guys, Lazy here, and thank you very much for listening. Well, it's been a while, hasn't it? So although it's a bit late, I hope you all had a great Christmas, a great New Year, and yes, I intend to get back into the flow of things now. I'll be back again soon with the annual compilation, as well as another video. But for now, I'd like to thank all of my supporters here on YouTube and over on Patreon, especially my biggest supporters: Holly Lyons, Gina Valera, Connor Lothan, Hamish, Alana Pons, Azrael Warakai, TNS Mum, Jesse Jug, Asia Mina, Hamish K, George Lopez, Farewell Tattoos Jack FL, Yokai, Terry Ford, and Adelstein Trosterson. Thank you guys so much for your continued support.